Well, welcome to another edition of the Get Made podcast. All right, y'all know I'm finna be totally excited today. I'm always saying I'm never gonna do something that my man is not gonna be a part of, and so y'all know, everybody know how I feel about him. Everybody know I care about him. I love him. He's a good dude. He's someone who's really working in the community, like it who like it, hate it who hate it, and we're going to talk about some real interesting things for you guys today. I'd like to introduce to those who know him, those who don't, my main man, Imam Shadeed Muhammad. Shadeed, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
All right, man. So I normally allow people to kind of give a quick, bio of themselves when they come on. So let you do that before we jump into this podcast. All right.
Okay, sure. It'll be really short.
Hey, man, it's as long as you need it to be, short as you want it to be. How about that?
Alhamdulillah, that's good. Okay, so my name is Shadeed Muhammad. I am the Imam of Rolda Islamic Center of Delaware in Newark, Delaware. Alhamdulillah, we've been involved in the Muslim community for well over 2 decades, assisting families, assisting communities, building our communities, brick by brick, starting from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much my bio. Very short.
Yeah, pretty short.
Magnificent, nothing, phenomenal,
Yeah, well, it's a good thing. Man is very modest, and kind of how we kind of got started together. For people who know or don't know, we actually started. We had a marriage retreat.
Right.
I met him initially at the marriage retreat that they was doing with UNM up in out of Philadelphia, and then from there we kind of started a marriage retreat, managing the flow, marriage myth and me, and we've taken that clean up and down the whole East Coast and even to Mexico, right? And so we've had some nice times, and we got to bond, and I got to know the man, and the man got to know me, and here we are. We're here today, and I'm very pleased and very happy that he's a part of the Get Made podcast show. And so, with all that being said, we actually have 3 the Get Made podcast questions, right? And then from the third question, we kind of dive over into the conversation that we're going to have. First question would be, any books that has inspired you as far as towards manhood is concerned? What books that may have inspired you? Let's between 1 and 3, because I know you're an avid reader. So let's go between 1 and 3.
Of course, the Quran is at the top of that list.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing book. Every time I read it, every time, ayats that you thought you knew and ayats you thought that you had unpacked in every way possible to unpack it, you always come back to it and find something else.
Mm-hmm.
So at the top of that list, of course, the Quran. There were a number. I mean, you talking about books in any particular subject matter, or
whatever books that has inspired you in the essence towards manhood?
I mean, if we're talking about secular,
and that's all up to you. That's
non-religious. I mean,
that's gonna be based on you.
There were a lot of books. I think what is this? A lot of the titles are a lot of the authors are slipping me, but
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's come back to that.
All right, yeah, because I like doing this question here, man. These 3 questions is really kind of pigeonhole a person in and make them think about it, right? Because I know for yourself, you are an avid reader, so it's not as if you just read 1 or 2 books. I've been in your house, so libraries all the way around it. You know what I mean? So books all around it. So, and that's just the ones I was able to feel, not the ones that you got on your phone, probably, and anything else, right? So, all right, next, a man that you personally know, man or men that you personally know, that exemplified manhood?
I mean, pretty much every brother that I have ever come in contact with. I can't specify any one particular person. I'm one of those. I'm an unconventional learner, meaning I kind of learn from the environment that I'm around, and I mean, even from men that don't necessarily exude, the qualities of manhood. I mean, you can learn a lot from that person as well. Learning what not to do. For example, like I didn't grow up with my father, and may Allah have mercy upon him. He took the shahada before he passed away months ago. Alhamdulillah. But although I didn't grow up with my father, and my father wasn't like the greatest specimen of what it means to be a father, what I did learn from him is what I didn't want to do with my children.
Okay.
So I looked at what I didn't get from him, and I used that as part of my journey towards being a good father to my children. I based part of that off of what he wasn't able to give me. And I mean, he showed up the best way he knew how.
Right.
However, I use, what he was lacking in as a means of, or the fuel that I needed to become, a good father for my children.
Okay.
I don't have any one particular person that I kind of come in contact with. I mean, obviously, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My responses are always going to be, especially from the very beginning, my responses are always going to be cliche to some. But I don't live in a world where I'm amazed with individual figures that that I see. There is no man on the face of the earth that I am more impressed with than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
No. So
being honest with you,
no, that's a good. I mean, that's your answer, and it's a good one because it's your answer. And I even like to respect. I respect the fact that how you even categorize the situation with you and your father, not so much as what he did, but what he may not have done that has inspired you to be the man that you are with your children.
Right.
And you have a lot of boys, you know what I mean? And so, and so therefore you have to be what they look to, like it who like it, hate it who hate it, right? They're going to have to look to you as their figure. So, and for you wanted to make sure, from what I'm hearing, you wanted to make sure that you didn't do to them what was done to you.
Right.
Whatever mistakes you made is going to be your mistakes. It's going to be the mistakes that came before you.
Right. Exactly. And they're going to look at, some of the things that I've done, and the advantage that my children will have is that they can look at from both paradigms what I've done for them as a standard of how a man should show up for his family. And then, of course, the things that I lacked in. And so they have, they'll benefit from both paradigms, whereas I didn't grow up with my father. So I only have one paradigm to look at. And that is what he didn't do and how he did not show up.
So I follow. And so I have a question in that. So, and it's kind of, I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit as far as diving into something, but you kind of bring something that I have been talking about with many brothers before, that, we haven't been able to see our fathers be sons to other men. Right. Do you believe your kids, even though the relationship was what it was with your father, do you believe that your sons were able to see you be a son and carry out son duty towards, or seeing you be a son to your father?
I think in some capacity, because he was around probably for the duration of the time that I had I mean, obviously, for the first 7 years of my life, I was living in Saudi Arabia, so he didn't really have a chance to interact with my children during that time.
Right.
But once I came back to America and I was here permanently, they got to see me going to visit him. They got to see me interact with him and engage with him for the short amount of time that we had. So to some degree, they did see me do that. They saw me go out of my way to go visit him, to drive up from Delaware to New Jersey to go visit him. They saw me making those type of sacrifices.
Right.
Children got a chance to spend the night with him, we would leave them at my father's house, and me and my wife would go to a hotel, and we would leave the kids, with him to give him an opportunity to spend time with them. So to some degree, they did see me, but not in the full scope of what it means to be a son to a father.
Right. Well, I mean, in some regard, they get to see what was going to be important at some level. Right. And so that was kind of the connection that I was making there. So last question, then we're going to dive into the podcast. What do you believe, from your perspective, is the state of Black manhood today? And I'm going real specific today in dealing with the wives or even dissolving of the relationship with the wife. So I'm going to look, because I know this is a lot of work that you do within marriage and things of that nature there. So I'm going to go specific with you today in that.
So it seems like your question is kind of like twofold or threefold.
Well,
it's
the state of manhood today.
State of manhood
today in pertaining to his marriage, and even the dissolving of a marriage, because all that goes hand in hand at times.
Right. So Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. As it relates to the state of manhood, we're talking about within the Muslim community, I presume.
Well, let me be a little bit more, maybe with that, but I am talking about Black manhood.
Okay.
I am dealing with that, but we are speaking to Muslim men. We talking to a lot of men, period, in general, because I got a cross pollination of people who watch.
Right.
But, so if you can kind of look at it from maybe your paradigm, how you see it.
Okay, so I can't really speak to the larger Black community, other than looking at some of the statistics, and then of course what I see on social media, what I hear from people, and just kind of draw my own conclusion from that, which may or may not be necessarily accurate. But within the Muslim community, I can be a little bit more specific because I'm in it. I'm a part of it. I live it. I'm rubbing shoulders with brothers, doing counseling sessions. So I'm kind of in it. So I can be a little bit more precise when it comes to the state of Black manhood with regard to how Muslim men are showing up for their families and how they are exiting these relationships or these marriages. I don't think that we're living up to our fullest potential, and there are a number of reasons. I'm not just throwing that out as a blanket statement. If we're going to really unpack this conversation, we have to compartmentalize, why these things are taking place. But I really, there are a lot of contributing factors to why men are not showing up for their families the way that they should. You have environmental influences, you have, familial influences, you have religious influences, and all of those things have, opened up a door for a deeper conversation. But to shorten that and to make it more concise, I think that the whole idea of manhood has been convoluted. The whole idea of what it means to be a man has been convoluted. I mean, you have primarily 3 generations of men that are, functioning in the same space today. You have
at the same time, right?
You have Gen X, which is our generation, right? Anybody that was born from 1962 to 1980, they're considered Gen X. That includes me. I was born in the 70s.
Right.
All right. And their rearing was by baby boomers. Our parents or grandparents were baby boomers. Right. Most of us, especially those of us born in the 70s, most of us were not raised with our parents. We were raised by our grandparents. Most of our parents were sucked in, either through drugs or jail, or coming home from Vietnam, or coming home from the war, and addicted to drugs and addicted to, whatever was going on in those environments. So most of us were raised by our grandparents, and therefore we have a lot of old school ways.
Right.
I have a lot of old school ways. Me and my wife may differ on a lot of things because they're millennials, which is the next generation. Millennials, anybody born from 1980 to I think 1996, that they are considered millennials. 1997, that's a different generation. All right. And then you have Gen Z, which is from 1998, I think, all the way up until like 2000 and 2012 or something like that. So these are the three populations that you have existing in the same space today. And our understanding of manhood differs from one generation to the next. So what a millennial might consider masculine, a Gen X might consider very feminine. Painting your nails, wearing pocketbooks. That's more millennial Gen Z generation. For me, in my generation, that would have been considered, effeminate, for a man to do that. And so what I'm saying all of that to say is that all of that plays a part in the way that we are showing up for our families. Because for Gen X, what it means to be a man, we saw our grandfathers foot the bill for everything. Grandma didn't work. Grandma took care of the house. Grandma cooked. Grandma had the family over on Sunday. Grandma made, beat everybody in the house to make sure the house was clean. That's what grandma did. Grandma never went out to work unless, she was a profession. My grandmother, she was a nurse. So she worked because of her profession, not because she had to. Grandpa basically foot the bill for everything.
Everything.
So as a Gen X, that's my paradigm. So
and that standard of living, was different.
That's your standard. So when we talk about going 50-50, that's a foreign concept to me. Unless you just don't have the finances. And in that case, the woman doesn't make a big deal out of it because she knows who she's marrying.
Right.
She's marrying a man. And she knows, even though you may not have it now, because you're ambitious, because you're enthusiastic, at some point you're going to get it. So she doesn't mind making the sacrifice. She's not gonna, she's not gonna make any bones about having to, come up off of some money to help pay for the bills. That just comes with the territory of being in a relationship. Now you fast forward to millennials and Gen Z. These guys, when they show up in their families, they're showing up in ways that someone sitting where I'm sitting would, we would consider that to be less than a man.
Right.
And even according to religious scriptures, even in Islam, you have something, called a dayuth. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La yadkhulul jannah ad-dayuth," that the cuckold, as it's called in English, a cuckold will not enter into Jannah. And this is the type of man that allows his wife, the freedom and the liberty and, just the autonomy to, to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean that he takes away her freedom and her liberty to be, to operate in her full scope as a woman and her full nature as a feminine woman. That's not what it means. It means that the cuckold, the man that allows his wife to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uncorrected, unchecked, this man will not enter into paradise. And so the whole idea of men showing up, reversing the roles or compromising the roles of male and female, this is what you find with millennials and Gen Z. They don't operate with those, those roles that men are like this, women are like this. They have now come in and they have now convoluted the whole traditional role.
Blurred the lines. They really done blurred the lines.
Blurred the lines, right. So, and in doing so, it's to their own detriment, because God put these rules, these laws in place because he is the most wise. He is the most knowledgeable. And he knows he gave us a system that works.
Right.
And so when we come along and we begin to compromise these roles, we begin to play around with these roles, manipulate these roles, based upon our understanding or our beliefs about what a man and what a woman is and what their roles are, then we begin to, go down this slippery slope that you see happening in today's time. All of this is as a result of changing the creation of Allah, as Allah mentions in the Quran. That Shaitan would command human beings to change the creation of Allah. Change the creation of Allah doesn't just mean changing the physical creation of Allah, but changing the natural order that God put in place.
Right. There's a mindset. Basically there's a mindset that's being turned around.
Absolutely. It's being manipulated. Absolutely. And it's compromising the entire marital system from A to Z. Everything that marriage includes is now being compromised simply because we have changed the natural order. God's divine order. We've changed that. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So every problem that you see happening in marriages, in divorces, in raising children, all of it stems from changing the natural order. Because if we were to just follow that blueprint the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to, we wouldn't see the problems that we see happening in today's time.
Okay, so then I'm gonna hit you with this and tell me what you're looking at. We see divorces. They say divorcing is like 50%. 50% of marriages end in divorce. Something along the line there, right? I don't know. But if I'm looking at something that you're talking about right now, we talk about the leaders in this situation. That's going to go back to our generation, because you're a few years younger than me, but we're still in that same generational.
Right.
And so then that goes back to our generation. Right. And so there seemingly looks like a precedent being set for our generation, for the latter generations, because they say each generation gets worse, right? And so how am I phrasing this question? How do we then take the responsibility as Generation X, right? For those who believe or don't believe in that whole concept of generations, right? Those people who are in our age group, who are, we seen like women, heck, you've seen it even this, we got 50-something-year-old women, 60-year-old women talk about they want this soft girl era, right? Something that really is, in my opinion, that goes beyond the Islamic scope, right? Or the spiritual scope in that regard. But then there's been a multitude of various different eras that has taken place within women, right? But as men, as Generation X, we have seen these eras, and we have not responded well to them. Therefore, we get one replaced to get another, right? Get one replaced to get another, right? How have we not made the adjustment properly to be able to stop this, stop some of this?
I think a lot of it has to do with the what is called delayed maturity.
Okay.
If you look at, and I tell my sons all the time, like, I have twins that are 17. I have one that is 16. And I told them, like, at 16 years old, I was already on my own. Right? My mom passed away when I was 16.
Okay.
And when I came home from juvie, I was sleeping on my aunt's couch until, I was able to hustle up enough money to get my own apartment and, get me a vehicle and, begin,
living
being like an adult. So by 16 years old, I'm on my own, and I'm figuring it out. Whereas 16 years old, they sit around and play video games.
Right.
I can't remember the last time I played a video game.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's been that long in my life. Like, I think probably the last time I played video game was Mike Tyson Punch-Out in Nintendo. Wow. Wow. That was probably the last time I played a game.
Yeah, that's almost 20 years ago, bro.
No, that's about almost 40 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's about 40 years ago. We're talking about like 87.
Right, right.
87, 88. You know what I mean? By the
Mhm.
time I was in middle school, man, that was like games was over. You know, life started lifing. You know, things started, you know, moving very fast. And so when I'm talking about delayed maturity, a prolonged adolescence, which is the actual term for it. And I think that this is what happened. So you have in today's time, a lot of men, especially in our generation, Gen X, you'll find them, you know, peaking at 50.
Okay.
He's peaking at 50 because of the prolonged adolescence.
Lessons.
You know, and prolonged adolescence happens as a result of the man not learning the lessons from his experiences.
Okay.
If the lesson is, if the situation is presenting itself to you more than once, that means that you haven't learned the lesson from it. Because situations will continue to repeat themselves over and over and over again in your life until you get it, until you get the lesson.
Right.
Until you learn the lesson. This is how you have guys that go back and forth to jail, back and forth to jail. And then, you know, at 50, 55, they decide, man, I ain't got
no more. I ain't got more pain in me. I ain't got no jail in me. Right.
I ain't got no more jail in me. You know, and it's in that moment that they are forced because they didn't learn from previous experiences. It had to continue to repeat itself over and over and over again. And then finally the light bulb goes off at 50, but you know, you've missed out on your prime years.
Right.
Man reaches his peak of maturity at 40.
Right.
So if you peak at 50, you've already lost 10 years.
10 years.
And even more than that, if you didn't learn the lessons in your first 30 years.
Right.
So there's this prolonged adolescence with a lot of men in today's time. You'll see it when you see 50-year-old men still, you know, you'll see it with a lot of rappers. You see a lot of these rappers, these guys still sagging their pants. You know, you got a gray in your beard and you're still walking around with your jeans sagging. You still got on flashing Gucci belts and Louis Vuitton belts. And that's not to say you can't wear designer stuff. I like to wear nice stuff. But you'll never see me wearing it like my children wear it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I'm not walking around with skinny jeans on. I'm not walking around with my pants sagging. I'm not walking around with, designer on to show the entire world that, hey, I have on designer. You know, and so this is the prolonged adolescence, and that shows up even in the way that we show up for our families. It shows up in the form of immaturity. It shows up in the form of irresponsibility. It shows up in the form of lack of accountability. These are the ways that it shows up. So we're talking about prolonged adolescence and how it shows up in the way that a man interacts with his family. And these are the ways that they show up. And you see a lot of the problems that, you know, and I'm sure that you know this just as well as I do, when you're conducting counseling sessions, you see that the root problem of a lot of the issues stem back from a lack of accountability, irresponsible behavior, irresponsible decisions, poor choices. All of that has to do
poor
with
development, right? Poor development, and a lot of things.
You see some of the decisions that the man is making, and you're saying to yourself, bro, you functioning like you're 16.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're 46.
Right.
Children, and you know, you have a whole family behind you.
You got grandkids coming around now, and this is how you still rolling.
Exactly. So there is a prolonged adolescence, and that prolonged adolescence, it comes with its share of baggage that shows up at the doorstep of these marriages that we see crumbling in front of us.
Now, I want people to understand that we're not saying there's an excuse on the side of women. This program is not about the women. This program is about men. All right. So our major focus in this is, you know, again, being made, manhood, accountability, development, enrichment. We're trying to build manhood. We're demanding accountability. We're promoting development, and we're providing the tools for enrichment. This is what this program is about. So anybody go to start talking about, well, what about the women? We're not talking about the women. So I want y'all to be clear. about that.
And even
Right.
that is a form of irresponsibility or immaturity when we can't address a situation head on without this us versus them. You know,
Them.
women do it
Exactly.
as well as men do it. And it's
Hmm.
just like if I'm concentrating solely on the men, why is there a need to make this or equate what we're talking about with what women are doing?
Right. Well, I mean, and that's what, and it's unfortunate that you even have to make these disclaimers and you have to put this out here because you're going to have some men who are going to sit there and vent their feelings, which is, to me, is this whole emotional deregulation, which means they have a lot of development that hasn't taken place, right? That goes
Exactly.
back to that conversation that we're having,
Right.
right? And so you have to make this type of statement in order to get through. So get out your feelings and listen to what's being said so you
Right.
can kind of benefit from, hopefully.
It's like when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he went to during the Umrah, during the Eid, and after he finished the Eid khutbah, he walked over to the women. So the Eid khutbah was general,
Mm-hmm.
and then he makes a specific address to the women. He goes over to the women and he said, "Oh, women, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give charity from your gold, even if this the gold that you wear, because I saw the hellfire and I saw that the vast majority of the people in the hellfire were women."
Mm-hmm.
And one of the women stood up and said, "Well, why is the vast majority of the people in the hellfire women? Is it because we're women?" And he said, "No, it's not simply because based on your gender. It's there are certain qualities that you guys have that are particular to you that is very prevalent amongst the women that is the cause for you to be the majority of the people in the hellfire. One of them is that you curse your husbands and you are ungrateful for any good that the man extends to you. A man can spend his entire life doing nothing but right by you, and the moment you see one thing wrong, you become dismissive. You say, "I have never known any good from you."
Good from you, right?
Right. To dismiss the person's good like that, that is a quality that is, that warrants you being in hell.
Right.
Because he who does not thank the people has not thanked
Thank
Allah.
Allah, right?
You understand? If you find it difficult to be grateful to people, then we can only imagine, we can only assume that your gratitude to God is either the same or less.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you give out gratitude, you give it out freely to human beings, then that is an extension of your gratitude to God.
Right.
But when you're stingy with your gratitude towards human beings, then it only means that you're possibly stingy with your gratitude with God.
Right. Oh, for sure. You know what I mean? And then
Our interaction with one another is just an extension of our interaction with
God.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
That's right. That's right.
So none of the women stood up and say, "Well, what about the men?" No,
Right.
they took that admonition on the chin.
They took it on the chin. Right. They
Because
took that on the
the
chin.
address was specifically to them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
that on the chin.
you
Right.
gotta, in order for your message to resonate with people, you have to address the men and then you have to equally address the women. You can't address one group in one particular setting and then address another group at another set. You got to address both simultaneously so that it's like giving everybody an award,
Right. A participation award.
first
Right.
place. Okay? So you give the person that's first place an award, you give the second one second place award, third place award, and then you give everybody else a medal for participation.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is this inclusive, type of atmosphere that we live in where everybody has to feel included.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I'm glad you say that. And I'm glad you actually put that in context, even with the women, how the women here, the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was addressing them. And they took it on the chin. They took it on the chin. They say, well, what about Fulan over there? What about them? They be doing this. But now here's a question that I will have even with that, because I'm not giving anybody a crack to slip out of, right? And so I want men to know, or do you believe that even though there is a sense of gratitude, they have to have accountability for their gratitude, that we do some things that then promotes the lack of gratitude from women?
What do you mean?
Like Okay, if a person's not showing up, but it's like you say, is he shows up as a cuckold,
Right.
right? So somewhere along the line, that woman's not respecting him either, right? She probably has a natural disrespect going on anyway. But if he shows up totally like that, he's going to be two things. Either she's going to be mad at him for trying to pull her into what it is he thinks is going to be the right thing for her to do by restrictions or by boundaries and limitations and things that nature there, or she's not going to respect him because he is letting her do whatever the heck she want to do, right? And so therefore she's not saying, well, he gonna let me do any of this anyway. So she do anything in his face. She put all of it in his face. She do this or do that or whatever, right? Is it that then they have a sense of disrespect because he's like that? Or what is his role in her disrespect or in her lack of gratitude or respect?
Okay, so I'm kind of confused with the question, because
Okay.
like the question is twofold.
Right, and it may be. So if you have to break it out in two folds, then that'd be cool. I'm saying, what is the responsibility of the man in the fact that the woman is not showing proper gratitude because he is, have some of this cuckold traits. Let's call it that, right? These cuckold traits, and he's not holding her accountable to. How is he then responsible? Because everybody has to be accountable for their sheep, for their shepherd, for their flock, right? Where is he not being held accountable? Where is his role in that? What she's doing, if he has
so
one.
I got you. So you're saying basically, if a woman is disrespectful to her husband, what role does the husband play in bringing about that type of disrespect in the relationship?
You got me now.
Right. Got you. So two things. Either there are a number of things. Either one, the woman is just has a natural disdain for men.
Right.
And that could be due to a number of factors in her life. Either her father didn't show up for her the way that or he, the father was disrespectful to the mother. She has some residual resentment, going on.
Or she just being trained like that by other women. You know what I mean?
Or she could have been, that's her preparation. That was her intro into, the world of relationships by way of her mother, older sisters, whatever the case may be. So you have some women that are just naturally disrespectful.
Right.
Not disrespectful in that they disrespect men. They just don't know how to communicate or know how to interact with men. All right. And you do have some that are just blatantly disrespectful, what they call man eaters. But what I'm talking about is the lesser version of that. And that's just a woman who just doesn't know how to communicate, doesn't know how to properly engage or interact with men. All right. Then you have the man on the other side of that. You have men that believe that allowing a woman to do whatever she wants to do is what makes him a good man, or it makes him less argumentative or less combative.
He's agreeable. He's agreeable.
Right. No, that's not agreeable.
No, I'm saying
an agreeable personality still has boundaries. Now has limits.
Okay.
We're talking about a person who is a youth, who is a person who avoids confrontation. So he says yes or doesn't say anything at all when he sees something that is clearly disrespectful, because he wants to avoid confrontation. Perhaps that's the way that he was reared. Perhaps, his mother was, very confrontational, and, he learned how to navigate around his mother by avoiding confrontation with his mother. So that kind of trickled over into adulthood with him and his relationship with women in his life. There are a number of factors that have contributed to why men experience disrespect in their relationship. It all boils down to a lack of values, because people will only treat you based upon how you teach them how to treat you. A person is not going to treat you. A person doesn't just walk into your life and automatically starts to disrespect you. They wait and they watch you to see how far they can go with you. And this happens with women and this happens with men. Men will try you. Men will see how far they can go with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not draw a line, if you do not put up boundaries, boundaries are to protect you.
Right.
And if you don't, interact with people, and it doesn't matter if it's a platonic relationship, it doesn't matter if it's a marriage, doesn't matter if it's a business relationship, any relationship that does not have boundaries is toxic.
Okay.
Any relationship that doesn't have boundaries is toxic.
And when you say toxic, give just because that word gets used a lot. You know what I mean? So give an understanding of what you mean by toxic.
So toxic means that is going to be poisonous. I'm gonna use the phrase that you used when you were at the event with my man. When he said, "Are you toxic?" And you said, and I love the way you responded. You said, "I'm not poisonous, brother."
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what toxic behavior is. It's poisonous. It seeps into something and it destroys it inside out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what toxic behavior does. It starts off small, subtle, and then it grows because it wasn't corrected.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like a disease. It's
Right.
like some, poison that's beginning to spread throughout your body. If you don't stop it from spreading, it's going to eventually spread throughout the entire body and eventually consume you.
Right.
That's exactly what toxic behaviors do.
Exactly.
They will destroy and corrode the entire relationship.
Exactly.
So men who experience disrespect in their relationships, it all boils down to they never took the time to lead with their values and to put parameters around behaviors that they will not accept. They did not make clear the lines between their negotiables and their non-negotiables, things that I am not going to tolerate and things that I would be willing to negotiate with.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that comes back to bite you. People only interact with you based upon the standards that you've set for them. Mm-hmm. And there's a text from a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah tayyib la yaqbalu illa tayyib," that Allah is good and He only accepts what is good. Mm-hmm. Meaning, if God is good, that's the standard.
That's the standard.
And He only accepts what is good.
That
meaning
is the standard.
The boundary that supports that standard.
Mm-hmm.
Don't come to me half-cocked. Don't come to me with a good deed with a bad intention, or a bad intention with a good deed. I'm only going to accept what is good because I am good. You understand? Mm-hmm. That's the standard. That's the standard.
Wow, teach, bro. And a lot of times when you look at this, and I'm listening to you, and when you look at this, Shadeed, I'm thinking, okay, people are saying, well, I don't want the confrontation, or I don't want this. I don't want to let her do what she's gonna do because she's gonna do it anyway. You know how women is, and they call it the happy wife, happy life, and all this other type of stuff, right?
That whole concept right there, happy wife, happy life. We need to zone in on that concept, and we need to unpack that, because there has been nothing more corroding to relationships in today's time than that concept right there.
Man, this is like
that is a unilateral relationship.
That was the third podcast I probably did right there.
Everything focuses on making this woman happy. Totally dismissive of what the man needs in his relationship. And Fairland, you find men function in their relationships like that. They could care less about whether or not their needs are being met, whether or not their baseline needs are being met, or just as long as I make sure that she's happy. Here again, that is the, avoiding confrontation